So if you're jumping into insulation, that must mean that you've made it through framing. That's awesome. I hope that whatever project you're working on, you're super pumped about it and it went through and you finished it up without too many hiccups. Hopefully these videos were able to help you get through that. And then now you're jumping in, you're thinking about insulation. So as an inspector, before you dive into insulation, I just want to make sure and just kind of reiterate that make sure that you don't cover anything without your inspections. If you're required to get a permit, most likely they're going to want to look at all your rough-in, so be any plumbing, electrical, mechanical, any type of stuff that was put in the walls. They're going to want to verify your framing, your roof structure, your floor, all those types of components, structural components, before you insulate. So if you haven't got there yet, definitely take a pause. You might want to get your materials on site, even think about getting your drywall ordered, but make sure you call for those inspections before you cover anything. So now, insulation. Well, insulation can change with every state that you're in. It could even probably change depending on which county you're in. And so it's going to be hard for me to tell you exactly what you need for insulation as far as R value. But I'll at least tell you kind of how it works where I'm at and just kind of show you general installation process and how most people do it, so you have an idea when you dive into it. For example, where I live, this is how thick our energy code is. So this goes through, it's nice thick for just energy, right? And now the state I live in is pretty strict on energy requirements. The state you live in may not be. And so it might be pretty straightforward boilerplate and not an issue. But just definitely check with your building department. Even if you weren't required to get permits or anything, you could still just call down there and say, hey, what are you guys requiring for insulation in your walls and your floors and your ceilings? So you have an idea what to buy at the store. Where I'm at, in our walls, we require R21. We require R30 in the floors and R49 in the ceilings unless it's vaulted, and then it can be R38. So again, so you got floor, so maybe you got a crawl space, okay, and you're going to insulate that floor because you have say a vented crawl space, unconditioned, right? So R30 in that floor. Your walls would be framed at a 2x6 and they'd have R21 in them. And then up above in your attic would be blown in most likely, and it would be R49. And then if it was a vault, maybe you're filling with bats as well, and that would be R38. Now, you can fit R19 and R21 in a 2x6 wall, and you can also fit like R15 and R13 in a 2x4 wall. So maybe in your particular situation, you have existing framing. And you're like, I can't fit R21 in there. It's like, okay, well, then if it's an existing situation, all you did was maybe tear some drywall off, run some electrical wire. It's like you put it back the way it is to the best of your ability. Depending on how you can get materials, I'm pretty relaxed with people in our area. It's like if you can get R15 for your 2x4 walls, put it in. If you can only get R13, just because of material shortages or something, put in R13, right? So do the best you can. The idea is the thicker your insulation is, the more R value you have, the less your energy bill will be, right? So it pays off in the end to seal those cracks, to seal any gaps, put in that extra insulation. It will save you on your energy down the road. And I know that, as a world, as a country, I know they're trying to be more energy efficient. So it pays to put in that little extra. The house that we built a few years ago, we ended up putting R60 in the attic. It was like, they're there, they're going to be doing the work. Let's pay a little extra, get a little extra R value in the ceiling, because that's where you lose a lot of your heat, and let's protect it. So what is R value? So the high R value is essentially like how well that insulation can provide a thermal break, right? How well can it insulate between whatever's going on outside and what you want for conditioned air on the inside, okay? So the higher the R value, the better protection it is. And that's why like a 2x4 wall, you might get R13 in it. 2x6 you can get up to as high as like R21 if you're using bats. I've had situations where people have, so if you put in new framing, you got to bring it to code, right? So I've had people in the basements, they framed it with 2x4s, which is awesome, but they needed to bring it out from the wall, right? They need to have 5.5 inches, like 2x6 width to put R21 in, and they didn't do that. They say, well, you're going to have to either like fur out that framing, maybe put some 1x1s on there and kind of make the framing deeper, move the walls out, or figure out some other method to get to R21. At the end of the day, it didn't really matter to me how you got there. It was just that you met that R value. So I've had people look into foam board, doing multiple layers of that. I've had people look into spray insulation, where you actually like spray foam and fill the whole cavity with like spray foam. We've had people look into like a bib system, where you actually like kind of put up like a plastic or fabric barrier over the walls, and you fill each cavity with attic insulation, pretty much is what it is, right? So it's thicker, and it's each cavity in each space is more complete as far as being filled. When you get into bad insulation, right, you can have gaps and crevices and little spots that get missed. Well, that just means that those little spots are where hot and cold air are going in and out, right, through your walls, and you're losing heat or losing cooled air that you're paying to condition your space. So just keep that in mind. We also talk about attic insulation and baffles, attic rulers. And so when you get up into your attic, you need to make sure that, well, your attic is vented, right? And so if you have soffit vents, maybe your house doesn't have soffit vents, it's an older house, and it doesn't have any vents down low, well, then that's fine. You don't have to worry about baffles. But if you do, you're going to want to put baffles in, which is essentially all that is. It's a piece of cardboard, a piece of foam, or something that separates about a 1-inch gap from the top of your roof sheeting in your attic down to that soffit, so that when you blow the insulation in over the top of everything, it still allows air to go from the soffit vent up into your attic. And I'll show you a few pictures of this to kind of have an idea what I'm talking about. But definitely check with your building department, find out what's required, and just make sure you meet those minimums. Again, if it's existing, most likely all you're going to have to do is just fill the cavities the best that you can. If you got your complete remodel and you're up in the attic and you've messed around with all the attic, well, your building inspector might ask you to bring that to code. You might say, well, the insulation that's up there is all existing, but you went in there and kind of messed it all up, or moved around, or you messed with a section of it. And they say, well, let's just bring it to code. You're already gonna have to like fix a few little areas or add a little insulation in a few spots. So why don't you bring the whole thing up to code? You could end up getting that from your inspector. But if you go into it thinking like, hey, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to fill all my cavities. I'm going to make it as energy efficient as possible. And then you're just going to save yourself down the road when you have your energy bill. So let's look at some pictures and we'll just kind of dive through it. I don't have any like specific code to go over with you because like I said, it can kind of change a little bit. So it could be more stringent or it could be less stringent. I just want to make sure that you kind of have an understanding when you start to dive into it and you're thinking about materials. So let's look at a few pictures and then and then I'll kind of show you some general installation processes that I see and that we kind of look for when we're out there doing inspections. So I didn't talk a lot about below grade insulation, right? So anytime you have a slab on grade, you're going to insulate that foundation. You're going to protect any heat loss that might come up or go down through that slab from the outside. And at least where we're at, we require to be 2 feet down. So this is in a new house. This is a basement, but right here it's essentially just a slab on grade, right? Because it's a daylight basement, and this particular section would be just a slab on grade. And so they've gone in here and they have glued or attached 2-inch foam board all the way around this particular section. They will backfill it, pour their slab, and you will hardly ever know that it was ever there. Where you're at, they may require something like this. If your footings are only required to be 12 inches deep, not 2 feet like where I'm at, well then you might only have to put like, a 1-foot strip on there or something like that. Here's kind of another picture of it. See these new houses around here, and this is kind of what they're doing as far as their process is concerned. And then they'll go in there and backfill it. General bat insulation. So bats are normal, right? That is what most people install in their walls, is bat insulation. And so here you can see they put in their bat insulation, and then they've put their vapor barrier up there. And you know, standard plastic is what you normally see. Sometimes you see, maybe you can only find faced bats, which has like the paper on it. And you can use that paper as your vapor barrier, but keep in mind that technically you shouldn't see any wood, or if you do see wood, it's only the studs, you know, that's nice and clean and stapled off, because any holes that you have in that are going to be holes for heat loss to get through, or for vapor to get through, right? And that is up for debate on whether or not you put in a vapor barrier or use some other type of mechanism. So here would be bat insulation installed that's faced. So faced bats. You can see you don't see any studs right here, right? It's just clean. It's stapled off. The flaps are overlapped over the studs, and it's a nice clean install. Let's see, here was one where same thing, they went in and it's nice and clean, but they stapled on the inside of the stud. I usually tell people to overlap it so you don't see any wood, but something like this would probably be efficient. And they've got R21 in the walls. Now, what about if you don't want to install a vapor barrier? I have built a lot of houses over the days, and we didn't install any vapor barriers. We used what we call a PVA. That's a primer vapor application, primer vapor barrier, and it's installed after drywall. It's actually installed during texture. So they would go in there, they'd put the PVA on, they would texture it, and then you'd come in and paint it. And it's just like it's kind of like a sealer that they put over the drywall, and it just helps protect that moisture side of things. I like to see my walls breathe a little bit, right? The last thing you want is moisture stuck in there, because it equals mold and it equals deterioration and all kinds of stuff. I'm not saying that the vapor barrier is bad. There are thousands of houses with vapor barriers on them. I inspect them all day long. I inspect them with paper-faced bats. I inspect them with the plastic on it. But I also inspect them where people are like, hey, I don't have a vapor barrier, I'm putting in a PVA. And I'll say, hey, okay, cool. You know, maybe just leave the bucket for final inspection. When I show up, I can just verify that you put it on, and you're good to go. But I like things to breathe. So that's kind of my thing. If you're wanting everything to be super tight, obviously the plastic is going to help with heat loss as well, and energy efficiency as far as gaps and cracks, right? If it's a solid piece of plastic put up there, you're not going to have as many little pinholes for air to move through. I kind of would rather pay a few extra bucks and know that my walls are breathing a little bit. So that's personal opinion, not inspector opinion. That's personal opinion. So let's look again at, so we talked a little bit about bat insulation. So what about like where you have a header? So there's like a window right here. They frame this all in. And so you have 2 2x10s or something above the window as part of your framing, and you still have like a little gap right there because you put in 2x6s probably to meet your insulation requirements. And so they've gone in here and put a little foam in like this, okay? And then they sealed off all the way around it so they didn't have any air penetrations. And then they would be installing a PVA, right? So they just kind of had filled all their gaps with insulation, and then they're gonna PVA it when they're ready, when they're through drywall. They've also gone in here with a foam gun, and they've any gaps, any cracks, they've filled them, right? Keep that air movement down. Here's another one. So this one's got a plastic vapor barrier on it. It's all installed. They even insulated the ceiling. I think these were apartments I took pictures of, and they wanted them for sound barrier. Here's another one with plastic on it. And let's see here. I wanted to hop into baffles so you kind of have an idea on baffles. So here's an attic ruler. When I do inspections, we always ask, install attic rulers. And you think like, well, it's just a ruler. But when you're up there in the dark, you've got your little light on and you're trying to blow in all your insulation up in there, and you're like, I have to make sure it's 14 inches or 16 inches or 12 inches or whatever the thickness is that you're required to put up there. and you don't know. There's stuff flying everywhere and your light's on and you're trying to blow it all in. Well, it's good to have attic rulers. So spread out sporadically throughout the attic so that as you're blowing everything in, you have kind of a baseline to work off of. So make sure you install those as part of your insulation install. And then here are baffles right here. So baffles, again, it's just allowing a space for air to go from the soffit vent up into the attic. And so behind here, this would be an exterior wall with the trusses. You'd have your eave and your soffit, right? And you have soffit venting in there. And that soffit venting, that air would come up. It would go in between the roof sheeting and this cardboard, and it would come out through this 1-inch gap. So now when you're up there, you can blow insulation right up against the top of this. And you shouldn't have any problems with making sure that your attic stays vented. There actually is a requirement. I don't know why it's in there, but there is a requirement for how far baffles have to carry up a truss line. And it's 24 inches above the bottom cord. So you can see that this baffle ends, and I've put a tape on here and measured from the bottom edge. So this is where you'd put your drywall, right? This is the ceiling, your drywall on the bottom of this. And so from there, measured up is 24 inches. And you say, well, I only have to put like 12 inches of attic insulation in there. It's like, well, I understand that, but you know, maybe they figure if these things get droopy or they fall down or something, that they're going to fall on top of the insulation and be okay. And so they want to make sure that's 24 inches. Now, what about like in your crawl space? Okay, and we talked about R30 minimum. And so here would be a situation where we have a vented crawl space. So here's one of the vents, and they've gone in here and they've insulated it, and then they put up string to make sure that it doesn't fall down. So just kind of tacked it in there with a stapler, just kind of run string, tack it up there, make sure things don't fall down. And they've also went in, and this is a water pipe right here, and they've protected the water pipe, strung it all up. Any type of traps, plumbing traps, anything that has water standing in it that you don't want to freeze if you live in colder regions, make sure you protect them, you know, and just save yourself the heartache down the road, and make sure that they're all cleaned up. Let's see, a couple other pictures here. So here would be a house that is vaulted. Okay, so they put in R38 right here. They put in R21 in the walls. So it's not R49 because it's vaulted. But right over here where it's a flat attic, that'd be R49. And then they've gone in and insulated this kind of this gable, this section, this interior break section between vaulted and just true attic space. So now they can blow insulation up against that, right? And then this R21, because it's still a wall, has to go from the floor all the way up to the roof. The biggest thing to remember with insulation is making sure that it's a complete envelope, right? You're insulating however your house lays out, your addition, maybe you got a living space in your garage, or like a shop area and you've added like a mother-in-law suite or something. Just think about anywhere that it's heated, any room that's heated needs to be encompassed by insulation. So in your basement, you're finishing your basement, you do the walls, but you also have to do the floor space, the joists above that wall. Now you don't have to do the whole floor, but you got to do just that section above that exterior wall, that wall that you framed up. You want to carry that insulation all the way up to the floor sheeting so that it then would pick up the insulation in your walls upstairs, encompassing that entire envelope, right? Keep the heat or the cooling in and keep the outside out, right? So that should kind of cover the basis on insulation. Check with your building department, find out what you need, get the right materials, and just make sure you install it properly, right? Make sure you get all the gaps and cracks, foam anything you can foam. A lot of guys will go in and they'll just buy cans of foam spray and they'll just foam air all the little cracks and holes and everything they can do, and then they put their bad insulation in. And then they'll go in and they'll vapor barrier it, or they'll decide to put in their PVA. Put in your attic rulers, put in your baffles, and then call for inspection before you cover, and you should be good to go. So hopefully that helps you through insulation and keeps you moving. For some reason, as an inspector, insulation is like just one of those things that homeowners are like, I didn't know I was supposed to get it inspected, or I didn't realize I needed R21 and I put in R15, or I didn't know that I had to insulate the the crawl space, or I didn't know that the attic insulation had to be R49. I thought it was R38 everywhere. And so just double check that, save yourself the time. If you do go in and let's just say you put R30 in the attic and you're like, that's what I thought, I looked online, it kind of gave me the wrong information. Well, just go up there and get some R19 bats and roll them over the top, right? Just, it doesn't matter how you get there, just get to what you need to get to. That way it'd save you a little bit of extra tearing anything out or have to go buy other stuff. Just try to overlap it, make it work, you know?